They thought they had already won the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. They never imagined the courtroom would become the place where their own story fell apart. The first thing Angela Brooks noticed wasn't the flashing blue lights. It was how quickly every pair of eyes turned toward her. On a mild Thursday afternoon, downtown Richmond bustled with its usual rhythm. Office workers hurried through crosswalks with coffee in hand. Delivery trucks rolled past storefronts. Conversations blended into the distant hum of traffic. Everything felt ordinary, until two patrol cars stopped beside the curb. Officer Daniel Harper stepped out first. His movements were practiced, deliberate, and unmistakably confident. A few seconds later, Officer Brian Collins emerged from the second cruiser, adjusting the body camera clipped to his uniform before scanning the sidewalk. Angela had just locked the front door of the accounting firm where she had spent the morning meeting a client. A leather folder rested beneath one arm. Her car keys remained loosely wrapped around her fingers. She had barely taken 3 steps toward the parking lot when Harper called out, "Ma'am, we'd like to speak with you." Angela stopped. She turned calmly. "Is there a problem, officer?" Neither officer answered immediately. Instead, Harper glanced toward Collins before pulling a folded sheet of paper from his pocket. "We've received information regarding a theft investigation." Angela frowned slightly. "I'm sorry. We need you to stay where you are." Several pedestrians slowed their pace. One elderly couple paused near a bus stop. Across the street, a young college student quietly lowered his headphones. People had an instinct for unusual moments, and this suddenly felt like one. Angela remained composed. "I think there must be some mistake." Harper's expression never changed. "Do you have identification?" She nodded. "Of course." Without hesitation, Angela reached into her handbag. Before she could remove her wallet, Harper lifted one hand. Slowly, his tone grew noticeably sharper. Angela immediately stopped moving. "I wasn't reaching for anything except my ID." Collins had already positioned himself several feet to her right. Not aggressively, but close enough to prevent her from simply walking away. The invisible circle around Angela had already formed. Most people watching probably assumed the officers knew something they didn't. That is often how authority works. It doesn't always have to explain itself. It only has to appear certain. Angela carefully looked from one officer to the other. "What exactly am I being accused of?" Harper glanced once more at the paper in his hand. "We'll discuss that in a moment. I'd appreciate understanding why I'm being stopped." "You'll have your opportunity." His answer sounded less like reassurance and more like a decision that had already been made. A slight breeze lifted the edge of Angela's blazer. She stood perfectly still. No sudden movements. No raised voice. No argument. Only quiet patience. Across the street, the college student subtly raised his phone. Not to interfere, simply to record. Experience had taught him that unusual encounters sometimes became important later. Harper accepted Angela's driver's license. He studied it for only a second before handing it to Collins. Neither officer appeared interested in confirming her identity. Instead, they exchanged another brief glance, almost as though they were waiting for something else. Angela noticed it. "So, am I free to leave?" "No." "Am I under arrest?" Neither officer answered. That silence carried far more weight than either possibility. Collins stepped toward the patrol vehicle and spoke quietly into his shoulder radio. His words were too soft for anyone nearby to hear. Harper never took his eyes off Angela. The crowd had grown larger now. People whispered. Some assumed the woman standing quietly on the sidewalk must have done something terrible. Others wondered why she looked remarkably calm for someone surrounded by police officers. Neither assumption was correct. Angela slowly folded her hands in front of her. "If there's evidence against me," she said evenly, "I'd like to understand what it is." Harper looked down at the paper once again. Then, almost imperceptibly, he folded it and slipped it back into his pocket. "You'll find out soon." Enough. Those words lingered in the afternoon air. Because there was one detail no one standing on that sidewalk. Not Angela, not the growing crowd, and perhaps not even the officers themselves, fully understood. The investigation they claimed had already begun, but the evidence that would eventually decide this case had not yet been created. And within the next 3 seconds, as Officer Harper reached for the handcuffs resting against his duty belt, the story everyone thought they were witnessing quietly became something entirely different. The moment the handcuffs closed around Angela Brooks' wrists, the afternoon stopped feeling ordinary. Not because she resisted, not because anyone shouted, but because something invisible shifted. Officer Daniel Harper guided her toward the patrol car with one hand resting lightly on her arm, as though every movement had already been rehearsed. Officer Brian Collins stood a few feet behind them, scanning the growing crowd while speaking quietly into his shoulder radio. One female suspect in custody. The words sounded simple, routine, professional. Yet every sentence spoken over that radio would soon become part of a record no one could erase. Angela looked directly at Harper. I still don't know why I'm being arrested. You'll be informed. For what crime? You'll hear it downtown. His answers never became longer, only colder. Several people continued recording with their phones. Others simply watched in silence, uncertain whether they were witnessing justice or its imitation. Authority often leaves little room for doubt, until someone begins asking the right questions. Angela stepped into the rear seat without resistance. The cruiser door closed. The sound echoed across the parking lot with surprising finality. Inside the vehicle, everything became strangely quiet. Outside, Harper removed a small notebook from his shirt pocket. He began writing. Not quickly, not carelessly, methodically. Collins walked over. What have we got? Harper kept writing. Attempted shoplifting. Failure to comply. Obstruction. Collins glanced toward the closed cruiser. She never really resisted. Harper didn't look up. She delayed. There was a brief pause. Then Collins nodded. That works. Neither officer noticed that the body camera attached to Harper's uniform had captured the entire exchange. They assumed the important part of the story had already been secured. What they didn't realize was that every report creates two versions of an event, the one that gets written and the one that actually happened. 20 minutes later, Angela sat alone inside an interview room at the precinct. A paper cup of water rested untouched beside her. She wasn't angry. She wasn't frightened. She simply replayed every word spoken on the sidewalk. People under pressure often remember more than those creating the pressure. Outside the room, Harper and Collins completed the incident report. Boxes were checked. Times were entered. Narratives became paragraphs. Paragraphs became official records. Every sentence sounded convincing, especially to someone who had not been there. Collins stopped typing. You think that's enough? Harper reviewed the screen. It'll hold. And the witness? Harper shrugged. They always disappear. He clicked save. The report entered the department's digital system at exactly 3:47 p.m. From that moment forward, it carried the appearance of truth. Official reports often do. Across town, Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett received the electronic filing less than an hour later. She skimmed the summary. Probable cause. Suspect refused commands. Officer safety concerns. Standard language. Nothing immediately stood out. She forwarded the case for routine processing. Another arrest. Another file. Another afternoon. Back at the precinct, Angela finally broke the silence. I'd like to contact an attorney. The booking officer nodded. You'll get that opportunity. She thanked him politely. Courtesy cost nothing, even when dignity seemed expensive. As evenings settled over Richmond, the paperwork continued moving through the system exactly as designed. Dispatch logs were archived. Body camera footage uploaded automatically. Witnesses returned home. Traffic resumed. The city forgot the scene almost as quickly as it had formed. But hidden among hundreds of digital files were 4 minutes that quietly refused to agree with the written report. No one had compared them yet. No one even knew they mattered. For now, the officers believed they had documented the truth. They didn't realize they had only documented the beginning of the evidence that would eventually unravel everything inside a courtroom. By 9 o'clock the following morning, the arrest had become just another case file. At least, that was how it appeared. Inside the county courthouse, folders moved from one desk to another with practiced efficiency. Clerks stamped documents. Prosecutors reviewed calendars. Bailiffs called names from crowded hallways. The system rarely paused. It trusted paperwork, and paperwork trusted the people who created it. Angela Brooks sat quietly beside her attorney, Marcus Reed. She wore the same navy blazer from the previous afternoon. Her wrists no longer carried handcuffs, only faint red marks that no one in the courtroom could see beneath her sleeves. Marcus placed the arrest report on the defense table. I've read it 3 times. Angela looked at him, and it tells a very confident story. She waited. The problem is, he continued, confidence and accuracy aren't always the same thing. Across the courtroom, Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett organized her files. She had prosecuted hundreds of cases. Nothing about this one had initially seemed unusual. 2 officers. Matching reports. Probable cause. Body camera footage listed as evidence. Everything appeared complete. Officer Daniel Harper entered through the rear door with Brian Collins only a few steps behind him. Both wore freshly pressed uniforms. Neither looked concerned. Harper even exchanged a brief smile with another officer waiting outside the courtroom. Experience had taught him that judges usually relied on official reports, especially when 2 officers supported each other's account. The courtroom slowly filled. Families whispered. Attorneys shuffled papers. The American flag stood motionless behind the empty bench. Everyone waited for one person, Judge Eleanor Whitmore. When she entered, the room immediately rose. The sound of chairs sliding backward echoed through the chamber before silence settled once again. Judge Whitmore surveyed the room with calm precision. She had spent more than 2 decades on the bench, long enough to understand that appearances deserved respect, but evidence deserved scrutiny. Please be seated. The hearing began. Olivia Bennett summarized the charges exactly as they appeared in the report. Attempted shoplifting, failure to comply with lawful commands, obstruction. Each allegation sounded straightforward. Marcus Reed stood only after the prosecutor finished. Your Honor, he began. The defense requests that all available evidence be preserved before any further proceedings. Judge Whitmore looked up. Any specific concern, Mr. Reed? Only that the written narrative may not fully reflect the entire encounter. Harper shifted slightly in his chair. It was almost unnoticeable. Almost. Judge Whitmore turned toward the prosecutor. Has discovery been completed? Not yet, Your Honor. What evidence has been collected? Olivia glanced at her notes. Officer body camera recordings, dispatch communications, incident reports, and booking documentation. The judge nodded once. Good. Then she spoke a sentence no one expected to matter. I would like every item preserved exactly as originally recorded. Harper's expression remained controlled, but Collins briefly looked toward him. Only for a second. Only long enough for uncertainty to appear. Marcus noticed. So did Angela. Judge Whitmore closed the file before her. The integrity of evidence protects everyone. Her eyes moved across the courtroom. The defendant. Then toward the prosecution. The state. Finally, they rested on the 2 officers. And every officer who places his name on an official report. The hearing lasted less than 15 minutes. No dramatic testimony. No emotional speeches. Only scheduling orders. Evidence deadlines. Routine procedure. Yet as people filed out of the courtroom, one unnoticed request quietly changed the direction of the entire case. For the first time since Angela had been placed in handcuffs, someone with authority had not accepted the written report as the final version of the truth. Instead, Judge Whitmore had asked for something much more dangerous. The original evidence. And hidden somewhere inside hundreds of ordinary digital files waited 4 missing minutes that no report could successfully explain. The strongest lie is rarely the loudest one. It is the one supported by paperwork. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, cardboard evidence boxes began arriving at Marcus Reed's office. Each one carried an official evidence seal. Inside were copies of dispatch logs, booking records, photographs, digital reports, and the body camera recordings Judge Whitmore had ordered preserved. Marcus didn't open the files immediately. He simply stared at the stack for several seconds. Some cases became clearer the more evidence they contained. Others became stranger. Angela sat across from his desk. You think we'll find something? Marcus offered an honest answer. I think the truth usually leaves fingerprints. He inserted the first body camera file into his computer. Officer Harper's recording appeared on the screen. The encounter unfolded exactly as the report described. Angela standing beside the sidewalk. The officers approaching. Questions. Commands. The arrest. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Marcus frowned. It almost matches the report perfectly. Almost. He replayed the footage. Then again, on the third viewing, he noticed something peculiar. The timestamp. He compared it with Officer Collins' recording. The clocks differed by only a few seconds. Normal. But when Harper's camera reached the moment immediately before the handcuffs were applied, the recording suddenly skipped forward. Not much. For minutes. Marcus leaned closer. Angela watched silently. What is it? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, He opened Colin's recording. The same encounter appeared from a different angle. This time the missing section wasn't missing. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That's impossible. Angela stood and walked behind his chair. The footage continued. Harper spoke with Collins near the patrol car. The microphones captured their conversation clearly. She never really resisted. Harper answered without hesitation. She delayed. Angela remembered those words. Marcus paused. The video. Then he opened the incident report. According to Harper's written statement, Angela had refused repeated lawful commands before being placed under arrest. Marcus looked back at the recording. No raised voice. No refusal. No attempt to flee. Only questions. Calm questions. He reached for another document. Dispatch radio logs. The report claimed officers had responded to an active theft suspect. The dispatcher recording described something different. Possible suspicious person. Marcus slowly leaned back. Suspicious person. Not theft. Not shoplifting. Not a fleeing suspect. Those weren't small differences. They changed the entire reason for the stop. Angela remained remarkably composed. So they changed it. Marcus nodded. I don't know why, but I know they did. He continued comparing timestamps. Dispatch. Body camera. Booking. Incident narrative. Individually, each inconsistency appeared minor. Together, they formed a pattern, like tiny cracks spreading across a sheet of glass. No single crack shattered the window, but every new one weakened it. Marcus printed screenshots from both recordings and highlighted the conflicting timestamps. Then he created a simple timeline. Dispatch call. Officer arrival. Conversation. Arrest. Report submission. For the first time, the sequence no longer fit together. Late that evening, Marcus sent copies of his findings to the prosecutor's office. No accusations. No dramatic conclusions. Only evidence. Olivia Bennett opened the email just before leaving work. She expected routine discovery. Instead, she found side-by-side images showing two official recordings telling two different stories. She stared at them longer than she intended. Prosecutors are trained to seek convictions, but they are equally obligated to seek the truth. And for the first time since Angela Brooks had entered the courthouse, Olivia began to wonder whether the official report she had trusted so easily was not the strongest piece of evidence in the case. It might become the weakest, because once one unexplained discrepancy appears, every other sentence demands a second look. Truth rarely raises its voice. It waits for someone willing to ask. One more question. The courtroom felt different that morning. Not louder, quieter. The kind of silence that settles over a room when everyone senses that something important is about to happen, even if they cannot yet explain why. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered promptly at 9. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood. Then everyone sat. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett rose first. Your Honor, before today's proceedings, the state wishes to address newly reviewed evidence. That sentence immediately drew every eye in the courtroom. Officer Daniel Harper remained expressionless. Officer Brian Collins folded his hands together a little tighter than before. Judge Whitmore looked toward the prosecutor. I'm listening. Olivia placed several printed photographs on the lectern. After reviewing discovery provided by the defense, the state identified discrepancies between the incident report, dispatch communications, and body camera recordings. The judge nodded once. What kind of discrepancies? Olivia answered carefully. The timeline appears inconsistent. Marcus Reed remained silent. He understood that sometimes the strongest argument was allowing the facts to speak first. Judge Whitmore adjusted her glasses. Let's begin with the dispatch call. The courtroom monitor displayed the official transcript. Dispatch had classified the incident as a report of a suspicious person. Nothing more. Judge Whitmore turned toward Officer Harper. Officer, your report states you were responding to an attempted theft. Yes, Your Honor. Can you explain why dispatch records describe something different? Harper hesitated. Additional information was received after the initial call. Judge Whitmore looked toward the prosecutor. Is that additional communication documented? Olivia glanced through the file. No, Your Honor. Silence returned. Not uncomfortable. Purposeful. The judge wrote a brief note. Then she continued. The body camera recordings. Marcus stood. Your Honor, with the court's permission. Permission was granted. The courtroom screen displayed Harper's recording. Everyone watched quietly. Angela standing calmly. Questions. Polite. Responses. No raised voice. No sudden movement. Then the recording skipped ahead. Marcus paused the video. Your Honor, this recording advances approximately 4 minutes. Judge Whitmore turned toward the second recording. Officer Collins' camera. The missing minutes appeared there. The conversation beside the patrol vehicle filled the courtroom speakers. She never really resisted. Then Harper's voice. She delayed. No one spoke. Judge Whitmore replayed the exchange. Once. Then again. She finally looked directly at Harper. Officer, your written report states the defendant refused repeated lawful commands. Yes, Your Honor. The judge folded her hands. Please identify those refusals in the recording. Harper looked toward the monitor. Several seconds passed. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he searched the screen as though hoping the evidence might somehow change. It didn't. Judge Whitmore did not interrupt. She simply waited. Experienced judges understand something valuable. Silence often reveals more than confrontation. Finally, Harper spoke. The camera may not capture everything. Judge Whitmore nodded slightly. Perhaps. Her voice remained calm. But today we have 2 cameras. She turned toward Collins. And 2 reports. Then back toward the evidence. And 1 timeline. The room had become perfectly still. Even spectators who had entered expecting an ordinary hearing now leaned forward. The issue was no longer whether Angela Brooks had committed a crime. A far more troubling question had begun to emerge. Could official records themselves be trusted? Judge Whitmore closed the evidence folder. We will continue reviewing every original record before this court reaches any conclusion. Her words carried neither anger nor accusation, only responsibility, because she now understood what everyone else was beginning to realize. This hearing was no longer testing Angela's credibility. It was testing the credibility of the arrest itself. A lie can survive an accusation. It rarely survives its own contradictions. The courtroom reconvened after a brief recess. No one rushed back to their seats. Even the spectators seemed to understand that the atmosphere had changed. This was no longer a routine hearing. It had become a careful examination of facts that refused to fit together. Judge Eleanor Whitmore returned to the bench carrying a thinner folder than before. She had removed everything that no longer mattered. Only the disputed evidence remained. Mr. Reed, she began, please continue. Marcus stood. Thank you, Your Honor. He approached the courtroom monitor and displayed a timeline assembled from the original evidence. 3 columns appeared on the screen. Dispatch. Body camera recordings. Incident report. Simple. Clear. Impossible to ignore. Marcus pointed to the first entry. Dispatch classified this call as a suspicious person report. He moved to the second column. Officer Harper's report later described an attempted theft investigation. Then to the third. The body camera recordings never mentioned stolen property before the arrest. Judge Whitmore followed each point without interruption. She preferred evidence over arguments. Marcus displayed another document. The report states Ms. Brooks repeatedly refused lawful commands. He pressed play. Angela's voice filled the courtroom. What exactly am I being accused of? Another clip. I'd appreciate understanding why I'm being stopped. Then another. If there's evidence against me, I'd like to understand what it is. Marcus stopped the recording. Questions. He looked toward the bench. Not refusals. The judge nodded slightly. Officer Harper remained perfectly still. But Brian Collins lowered his eyes toward the defense table. Judge Whitmore turned to Harper. Officer, would you like to clarify your report? Harper took a slow breath. My report reflects my understanding of the encounter. The judge's expression never changed. Your understanding? Yes, Your Honor. She glanced once more at the recordings. The recordings reflect something different. Another quiet silence settled across the courtroom. Not dramatic. Measured. The kind that forces every person present to think before speaking. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett stood. Your Honor. The judge acknowledged her. The state has independently reviewed the evidence submitted by the defense. She paused briefly. We are unable to reconcile several material inconsistencies. Those words landed with unexpected weight. The prosecutor was no longer defending the report. She was questioning it. Marcus remained motionless. He understood that justice often advances one careful sentence at a time. Judge Whitmore folded her hands. The purpose of this court is not to protect paperwork. Her voice remained calm. It is to determine whether the evidence supports the actions taken. She looked directly toward both officers. Official reports carry extraordinary weight. Her eyes moved toward the gallery. They influence arrests. Then toward Angela. They affect lives. Finally back to the officers. That is precisely why they must be accurate. Harper's confidence seemed smaller now. Not shattered, but no longer unquestioned. Judge Whitmore reviewed one final page. The court finds that the evidence presented today raises substantial concerns regarding the accuracy of the arrest narrative. She closed the folder. The record before this court is no longer internally consistent. No one reacted immediately. No applause. No whispers. Only silence. Because everyone understood what had just happened. The foundation of the prosecution had not collapsed all at once. It had fractured under the weight of its own inconsistencies. And once the court openly questioned the credibility of the arrest itself, the next hearing would no longer focus on whether Angela Brooks had broken the law. It would focus on whether the law had been faithfully represented by those sworn to enforce it. Justice does not become stronger when it speaks louder. It becomes stronger when it refuses to look away. The next hearing began under an unusual silence. News of the inconsistencies had quietly spread through the courthouse. Attorneys who had no connection to the case slipped into the gallery. Law students occupied the back row. Even veteran deputies stood a little longer than necessary near the courtroom doors. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Judge Eleanor Whitmore entered without ceremony. Her expression revealed nothing. Neither satisfaction nor disappointment. Only concentration. The court is prepared to continue. Marcus Reed remained seated. For the first time since the proceedings had begun, he had very little to say. The evidence was now speaking for itself. Assistant District Attorney Olivia Bennett slowly stood. She carried only a single folder. Gone were the stacks of reports that had accompanied the earlier hearings. Your Honor, she began. After reviewing all original evidence, the state has reached a revised position. Every eye in the courtroom shifted toward her. She looked briefly at Angela Brooks before continuing. The evidence presented by the defense has been independently verified. Her voice remained steady. The body camera recordings, dispatch records, and written reports cannot be reconciled without significant factual conflict. No one moved. Officer Daniel Harper stared straight ahead. Officer Brian Collins swallowed quietly. Judge Whitmore asked the question everyone expected. Does the state continue to rely upon the arrest report as originally submitted? Olivia answered without hesitation. No, Your Honor. The words landed with extraordinary force. Not because they were loud, because they were official. For the first time since Angela had been placed in handcuffs, the prosecution itself had withdrawn confidence from the officer's version of events. Judge Whitmore folded her hands. Please explain. Olivia nodded. The original report describes repeated refusals to comply. She glanced toward the courtroom monitor. The recordings do not. She continued. The report describes a theft investigation. She lifted the dispatch transcript. The original dispatch does not. Another page. The timeline contained in the written narrative conflicts with the preserved digital evidence. She lowered the documents. The state therefore cannot represent to this court that the report accurately reflects the encounter. Silence filled every corner of the courtroom. Not a single spectator whispered. Judge Whitmore turned toward Officer Harper. Officer, do you wish to address the court before I rule on the pending motion? Harper slowly rose. For the first time, his confidence had disappeared. My intention was never to mislead the court. Judge Whitmore listened carefully. Intent is important. She paused. So are facts. Harper looked down at the defense table. I believe my report reflected the situation. Judge Whitmore responded quietly. A report is not expected to reflect belief. She let the sentence settle. It is expected to reflect what actually occurred. Harper had no reply. Across the courtroom, Angela remained exactly as she had been throughout every hearing. Calm, respectful, silent. She had never needed the loudest voice. She had only needed the complete record. Judge Whitmore closed the final evidence binder. The court finds that the credibility of the arrest narrative has been materially undermined. She looked across the courtroom one last time. When official evidence contradicts official testimony, this court must follow the evidence. The balance of the case had shifted completely. No longer would Angela Brooks be asked to prove her innocence. The burden had returned to where it had always belonged. Those who exercised authority would now have to answer for the accuracy of their own actions. Authority is never measured by the power to accuse. It is measured by the courage to correct a mistake. The courtroom remained perfectly still as Judge Eleanor Whitmore reopened the case file. No one expected a dramatic speech. That was not her style. Her authority came from precision. Every sentence mattered. Every ruling carried consequences beyond the people sitting in the room. She looked first toward the prosecution. Ms. Bennett. Olivia Bennett stood immediately. Yes, Your Honor. Does the state intend to proceed with the charges currently before this court? The prosecutor took a measured breath. She had reviewed the evidence repeatedly over the past several days. Every replay led to the same conclusion. No, Your Honor. The words echoed softly across the courtroom. The state moves to dismiss all pending charges against Angela Brooks. No applause followed. Only silence. Because everyone understood the weight of what had just occurred. Charges that had once appeared routine had collapsed under verified evidence. Judge Whitmore turned toward Marcus Reed. Any objection from the defense? Marcus almost smiled. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded once. The motion is granted. Her gavel struck the bench. A single, controlled sound. Not loud, but final. Angela closed her eyes for only a brief moment. She did not celebrate. She simply released a breath she seemed to have been holding since the afternoon she was placed in handcuffs. Marcus quietly placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It's over, Angela answered just above a whisper. The case is. She looked toward the officers. But not what happened. Judge Whitmore had heard the exchange. She looked directly at Angela. Ms. Brooks. Angela stood respectfully. The dismissal of these charges does not erase what you experienced. The courtroom listened carefully. The purpose of today's ruling is to ensure that no person remains subject to criminal charges unsupported by reliable evidence. She paused. But this court also has an independent obligation. Her eyes shifted toward Officer Harper and Officer Collins. When evidence suggests serious irregularities in official reporting, the matter extends beyond the defendant. Neither officer spoke. Judge Whitmore continued. The complete record from these proceedings will be transmitted to the appropriate authorities for administrative review. Again, her words carried no anger. Only procedure. Only accountability. Olivia Bennett lowered her head slightly. As a prosecutor, she understood that public trust depended on moments exactly like this. Not when the system appeared flawless, but when it acknowledged error honestly. Harper remained motionless. The certainty that had accompanied him into the first hearing had vanished completely. Collins quietly stared at the floor. Outside the courtroom windows, sunlight filled the hallway. People waiting for unrelated hearings had no idea what had just happened inside. To them, it was simply another case. Another courtroom. Another ordinary morning. But inside that room, something far more significant had occurred. A written report had been tested against preserved evidence. And the evidence had prevailed. Judge Whitmore gathered her papers before addressing the courtroom one final time. The integrity of our justice system depends not upon never making mistakes. She looked across every face in the room. It depends upon correcting them when the truth becomes clear. The gavel sounded once more. Court is adjourned. As everyone slowly rose, Angela Brooks walked out through the same courtroom doors she had entered days earlier. This time she carried nothing in her hands. No case file. No restraints. Only something the official report had failed to take from her. Her dignity. And outside those doors, one final question still remained unanswered. What consequences would follow for the report that had nearly changed an innocent woman's life? Some verdicts end a case. The most important ones begin a lesson. A week later, the courtroom was quiet again. Another docket. Another list of names. Another ordinary morning inside a building where extraordinary decisions were made every day. Angela Brooks did not return as a defendant. She returned to collect the final paperwork confirming that every charge against her had been dismissed. The clerk handed her a single document. Just a few pages. Simple language. Official seals. To most people, it would have looked unremarkable. To Angela, it represented something far greater. Her name had been restored. Marcus Reed walked beside her as they left the clerk's office. You kept your composure through all of it. Angela smiled faintly. I didn't know if anyone would believe me. Marcus looked toward the courtroom doors behind them. They didn't. He paused. They believed the evidence. Angela considered those words carefully. There was an important difference. Belief could change. Facts could not. Across town, Officer Brian Collins sat alone in an administrative interview room. Investigators reviewed the same recordings that had changed the courtroom. No raised voices filled the room. Only videos, reports, timestamps. Every document was examined against the original digital evidence. No assumptions, only verification. Officer Daniel Harper had also been instructed to provide a formal statement explaining the discrepancies identified during the proceedings. The administrative process had only begun. Its outcome remained unknown. But accountability had already taken its first step. Not through anger, not through public outrage, through documentation. Back at the courthouse, Judge Eleanor Whitmore completed one final notation before closing the file permanently. She wrote only a single sentence. The integrity of the record has been preserved. Then she signed her name. For her, that was enough. Courts cannot erase what happened outside their walls. They cannot restore lost hours. They cannot remove the memory of handcuffs placed on an innocent person. What they can do is refuse to allow an inaccurate record to become permanent. That responsibility belongs to every judge, every attorney, every officer, every citizen who chooses truth over convenience. As Angela stepped outside, the afternoon sun felt warmer than she remembered. People hurried past without recognizing her. To them, she was simply another woman walking down the courthouse steps. No cameras followed. No reporters waited. Justice had arrived quietly, exactly as it should. She stopped for a moment and looked back at the courthouse. The building had not changed. Its stone walls looked exactly the same as they had on the day she first entered wearing handcuffs. The difference had never been the building. It had been the willingness of people inside it to keep asking one more question, one more review, one more comparison, until the truth could no longer be ignored. Imagine standing where Angela once stood, knowing that every official document seemed to speak against you. Then imagine discovering that truth had been waiting patiently inside the evidence all along. Not hidden by chance, only overlooked. Justice is not perfect because people are perfect. Justice matters because honest people continue searching when the first answer does not fit the facts. And that is what this courtroom will remember. Not the false report, not the accusation, but the day the evidence reminded everyone that a badge carries authority, while the truth carries something even stronger: the power to endure.